Okay, so now we've kind of experimented with this typography, and you'll notice if I blow it up, there's one tiny little thing that I could do a little bit better, is that you'll see that in this top corner that I'm circling with my cursor, there's an overlap of red and purple, and then down here there's an overlap here. Well, what I want to do is I actually want to probably make the base thicker, because these don't perfectly line up, but I don't want to change the angle because then I think it's going to look a little strange. So what I think I'd rather do is I would rather make the base thicker and the top thinner, because the base is typically the thing that's going to be smaller, excuse me, bigger. It provides more visual weight as a foundation. So what I think I'm going to do instead is I'm going to scoot this over. I'm not going to mess with changing the forms yet, but I am going to go ahead and I'm going to just select the M, and I'm going to, with the move tool, I'm using my nudge keys, my arrow keys, and I'm nudging it over. So now it's lined up down here at the bottom. And then what we're going to do is we're going to adjust the top a little bit later. So at least that's done. Now I want to deal with color. So one of the things you can do is you can come to this website called color.adobe.com, and if you log in with your Creative Cloud account, then you can access your themes and add new themes to libraries with your color profiles and things like that. If you don't have an Adobe Cloud account, you could either get a trial one, or there might be a few workarounds where you could do some stuff. But this part primarily is going to be for people who have a Creative Cloud account. And what it does is it allows you to do your libraries in the cloud so that you have access to them anywhere. And they used to allow you to download a little ACO file from this website that would create your color swatches, but they don't anymore because they're really trying to promote the use of their color libraries. So anyway, when you first come here, it's going to be on an analogous color scheme. Analogous means that the colors are sitting side by side on the color wheel. And if you highlight or hover over the color rule, you can choose like monochromatic, or, which of course means monochromatic means that it's in one hue range with different shades and tints of that hue. Triad is going to be 3 colors that are equally spaced across the color wheel. All right, so that's what a triad is. You can kind of start to understand what these different things mean. Complementary is when the 2 colors are directly opposite one another on the color wheel. It creates the most contrast. And so on. And if you want to do something that is custom, you can do something custom. So for instance, let's say that you like analogous and you stretch it out, but you really want to make a change so that one of the colors is outside of the normal range. You could come to custom and you could like change that. For instance, like you could add this other color. I don't know exactly why you might want to do that, but there might be a good reason that you would want to do something like that. Now I'm going to go ahead and jump over to one that I've already created, okay? And this is a theme that a color scheme that I'd like to use for the Werner Mitchell option. So one of the things that I can do is I can go to save it, but it's going to ask me, if I do that, it's going to ask me, you know, like which, what do I want to name my theme and where do I want to save it? So you can create a new library here. Let's call this, let's just call this Werner Mitchell logo, and I don't know, I'm just making this up, and site mockup. Okay, and then I can create a new library, and then we'll just call this Werner Mitchell. And then this way you have a library that you could always put your Werner Mitchell stuff into. So I'll save that new library. And then if you wanted to add tags for searchability, you can. You can also publish this theme to Explore. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and click on save, and you see now that it's published, and I could edit it anytime I want. I can delete it anytime I want. It tells me the creation information and so on. Now, the other thing too is you can always go back to Photoshop, and now if you look inside of your libraries, and if you don't know how to get to this, you can always go up to the window and open your library, okay? And now I can go to my Warner Mitchell library, and there's my color theme right there. So it has these things that I want. It's awesome, right? So this is kind of perfect for me. So if and you see I've actually kind of been messing around with it, but if these up here, by the way, are the recently chosen colors. These other swatches under the swatch panel are ones that are just the random. And so like if I were to go here and say up in the dialog box and say reset swatches, I don't want to append, I just want to say okay. And I reset the swatches, then all these other swatches that were down at the bottom, they're gone now. Okay, and so what I could do if I, you know, wanted to use one of these colors is I could just use it straight from here. And if you'll notice that whenever I click, it changes my foreground color, right? So I can use any one of these. And you'll also notice that every time I click, watch what happens. It puts it up in my recently used swatch colors. Now, one of the things that you might be wondering is, you know, like what happens if you don't have a network connection and your library is not available? Or let's say even better yet, that you want to share your swatches, your color samples with another person who maybe doesn't have a cloud account, for instance. Well, let me show you one of the things that you can do. And by the way, this is also something you can do if you don't have a cloud account. You can create your swatch libraries like this and save them on your disk, and you can carry them from computer to computer. So let me show you a little trick. Let's say that I don't want any of these colors. For some reason, let's just say that I want to get rid of all of these other samples. One of the things that I can do is hold down the Option on a Mac key, or on Windows, it would be Alt key. And notice that the eyedropper, when I do that, changes to scissors, and I can just literally, I can go and I can just cut all of these. Okay, and so I'm just cutting all of these, and if I go up here to top, it'll just let me cut all of them like really, really fast. And so what this is going to do for me is I know it seems a little bit tedious, and it used to be a little bit easier, honestly, before they had the libraries. There was a much easier way to get rid of all of the like standard swatches. Let me get rid of that last one. Okay, so now I have no swatches. Well, one of the things that I can do is manually create my swatches. So if, let's say that you don't either have a network connection, for some reason your library won't load, or you don't have a creative cloud account and you can't seem to get anything else to work. One of the things that you can do is go back to where you had your color rules set up, and you can actually just copy the hexadecimal number. All right, you can copy these and put them into a text file or something, or just copy them directly and jump back and forth into Photoshop. You can go to the color picker and you can paste it, right? And whenever you have that color picker chosen, what you can do is you can hit the little new swatch icon, and it's going to ask you, what do you want to call it? So like maybe we would call this WM-green, for instance, okay, for Warner Mitchell green. Okay, and then you could just jump back and do this for all of the swatches. All right, and so let's go back to the orange. Okay, we'll copy that and we'll jump back over to Photoshop again. All right, so this is a manual way. If you really want to isolate your swatch colors from everything else, you can do that. And then let's just make that, and we'll call this WM orange. All right, and so you don't have to watch me. I'm going to jump to the completed swatches. Actually, before I complete them, what I want to show you is that if your library is loading, okay, but you want to create this isolated set of swatches in a way that you can save these files out to give to somebody so that they could always have access to them without a network connection or without having their own personal Creative Cloud account. You know, like if you wanted to use a lab computer for something or something like that, then the other thing that you could do is if you do have a library access, you could also just click it here. It changes it in the foreground, right? And then you just create this, and you would say like WM red, okay? And I'll do this dark blue, and you can see it's also showing me the most recently used. Okay, so I'd say WM dark blue. Okay, and then lastly, let's do this one. and we'll call it WM light blue. Okay, and then this will be like a foundation. And so these swatches would be the foundation base that you would have available to pick from. And there might be occasions where you're only allowed to use very specific colors, like especially in logo design. So this might be a good reason to wipe away all of your other swatches so it's not confusing. And honestly, there's not a super easy way of doing that now that libraries are available, except for using it in your themes. Okay, so that sort of puts some people at a disadvantage if you don't have your own account, but that's the whole point. They want you to buy their product. So what I can do now is I can go up to this little dialog button, and I can go down to Save Swatches. And it's going to try to put it in my presets. So if you want to see where that saves it, it goes into my user account, into the library, application support, Adobe, Photoshop, 2017 presets, and then into color swatches. And I'll show you how you can get to that later. Windows, it's going to put it in a different place, so you can just see the pathway. It'll be like up in the top. You'll see the pathway of where you can find that. Anyway, so I'm going to call this Werner Mitchell, and we'll call it base swatches, okay? Because we might add some swatches and then we'd want to resave over this or save anew. But this way, if we call it base swatches, we can save a new version later that has additional swatches if we want to keep the base separate. So we'll say save. All right, and now that's all I can choose from, which is kind of wonderful. And if I wanted to, I could also reset the swatches. Like if I need something else for a different project, I can go to reset swatches, and it's going to say, do you want to append these to the other swatches? And you could say append. I'm going to show you some different options. Well, first I'm going to say OK without appending. Okay, so let's just say OK. And then you'll see that it's not appended to the end. And what it did was it replaced my swatches. Okay, but don't worry, we have it saved. So I can go back up here and say load swatches. And then I can go to Werner Mitchell base swatches. All right, and then what it did for me is it put them down at the end. Okay. Now, if I wanted to load the swatches, but actually not have these, instead of using load swatches, what I need to use instead is replace replace swatches. So if I say replace swatches, I click on open, then you see it just gives me these swatches right here, and I don't have to worry about having them appended at the end of this long list of other swatches, right? So I can get back to my core base, all right? If you wanted to export those out, there are two ways that you could get them off of the computer that you're working on and onto, like, say, a thumb drive, or to email them to somebody. You could either go back up here and go save swatches, and you could save them, instead of saving them to the normal preset folder, you could save them to your thumb drive, or some project folder that was on a thumb drive or something like that. That's one option. The other option would be, otherwise, by the way, if you don't eliminate all of them, what's going to happen is it'll save all of those swatches. But you can also, like, if you decide that this color palette's too limited, you can add some new swatches and you could give it a new name, right? But then you could load them from any computer. But let me just show you really quickly how to get to this folder. All right, so here, let me close some other stuff up. So if you look, you'll notice, let's just go, for instance, to, I don't know, to my desktop. Okay, and it's got a whole bunch of stuff. Now, how do I get back? Right, you'll notice that I said, okay, well, if we go to my user account, we need to go to the library, but you'll notice that there's no library visible. This is on a Mac. On Windows, it's going to be a whole lot easier to find, but on a Mac, it looks like the library is missing. Well, what you need to do, for some stupid reason, Apple decided that users are not to be trusted with their own library, which is where a lot of preferences are stored. So what you want to do is, you, in the Finder, okay, of a Mac, you would go up here to Go, and then you would hold down the Option button, because library is not available. Hold down Option, and you see library shows up. And what that'll do is it'll take you to the current user's library. All right, so there's library, and then you would go to Application Support, and then you would go to Adobe, and then you would find Adobe Photoshop 2017, and then you would go to presets, and then you would find color swatches, which is right there. And then this is where that's located. So you could make a copy of this onto your thumb drive, or you could email it or whatever. Okay, so that's how you could easily find this, and then that way it's saved. You have a backup in addition to having it on the cloud. Also, you have a backup in case, let's say, you let your account lapse and it just goes away or something like that. Okay. So now we can actually use this, and I'm just gonna go back over here to my adjustments panel, and I'm gonna work from my swatches for now. And I should also just say really quickly, if you don't feel like you really have a good handle on color, like you don't understand it, it is actually quite complex. It might not seem so on the surface, but sometimes it's the hardest thing to actually get to work right, you know, is to figure out the right kind of color and how colors interact with each other and how color wheels work and things like that. I'm going to recommend that you go check out my website, and I'll show you really quickly where to go. So learn.leekottner.com. And then when you get there, under this link called Art Speak, you can go down to the color section. And if you just start on the basics, it's going to walk you through from the very beginning to how all the way we get to color pickers. And this is really, really valuable to designers, to artists, to anyone who is going to create things, whether it's with paint, with light, meaning like with computer screens, with ink out of a printer. This is really important that you understand this stuff. So it talks about the different primaries, and then you can go to the next link down here and it'll walk you through, you know, how we use different color models and how they're basically based off of each other. Gives you some cheat sheets so that you can help yourself remember like which one is which and so forth. And then also before you go to the next lesson, which is the final lesson, it gives you these really, and they're not mine, I borrowed them from a teaching resource, but they're these very cool demonstrations on running light through colored filters so you can see how it works. And you can also download a PDF if you want. Next lesson goes, and it explains hue, value, and saturation. And it is the basis of how we actually have color and so forth, and it walks you through all of this. And it even gets to how we get the light primary color wheel into CMYK all the way to a three-dimensional model with the grayscale middle section, how we get color slices and then modern colored slice samples all the way to your modern color picker, and you start to see visualizations and how the math of it works and so forth. But this is a way that you can really start to understand how these color things work if you don't feel like you understand it at all right now. The other thing that is useful and important is that instead of just going to Cooler, you can also, or the cooler.adobe.com site, you can go up here to Window and go where it says extensions, and you can go to Adobe Color Themes, and it basically loads a version of Cooler right here for you. All right, and you can also, you know, look at these different color schemes here, and you can also explore existing themes. And so, like, if you know that you want something that's sort of like a fresh kind of like design set of design colors, you could type in the word design, for instance, do a search, and see what kinds of things come up, and you can search through those and, you know, decide if you want to use any of these, and they're typically going to be very bright or whatever. Let's say that you want something that's like, you want to look for something that's reminiscent of water. Okay, you can, it's going to help you find things that are going to be related to those colors. So this is kind of a really cool tool right here. And then you can save stuff and go to My Themes. Anyway, but I've got my swatches here, so I'm going to stick with those. Okay, so now the other thing that I want to do is I want to go ahead and apply the colors that are the correct colors. So I happen to remember which colors are which, and I'm going to need to, because these are still type layers, I need to go down here to my typography tool, and I'm going to select the W, and it's this light blue, so I can just click on it from my swatch palette, and then I can go over here and I can select the M. I can. I think I need to zoom out a bit so that I can do this. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and select that M, and it's going to be the orange color. Okay, and then the overlapping colors are going to start to happen when we get to the vector shapes. And those are going to be sort of this like bright red and this deeper, darker blue that we're going to have to work with. Anyway, so this is what we have so far. And if you wanted to check the logo, we could real quick. And you'll see that, yes, I'm in fact right. This is the lighter blue for the W, and the M is that orange color. So far so good. Now, the next thing that we're going to have to do before we start to modify these letter forms is that we're going to have to turn them into vectors and start duplicating and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and end this demonstration here, and we're going to move on to the next video.